Hello, I'm Sarah Manasra.
And I'm Virginal Darash, and this is Clarinet and Community.
A video series dedicated to clarinet, community, and belonging.
Welcome. Bienvenidos.
Greetings, clarinetists. During Women's Month, Clarinet and Community spent some time speaking with women who are part of the historical clarinet community. This is a community that embraces the sharing of knowledge and equipment in extraordinary ways, and these women have embraced and found their place within it. In our third and final interview, we spoke with Katherine Waffy Spencer. Her infectious enthusiasm and commitment to service is unparalleled. This conversation started as an exploration of historically informed practice and ended with thoughts on bringing community and service to a wide range of people. I was completely inspired after this interview to examine how I serve my communities with music, and I hope that it inspires you to do the same.
Katherine Waffy Spencer shares with us her ebullient and joy and gives us a behind-the-scenes peek at what it takes to be a modern and historical performance clarinetist. There's so much richness in her offering. I do hope you enjoy it.
Hello, we are here today with the phenomenal, exciting, wonderful Katherine Waffy Spencer. Waffy, how are you today? And could you just give us a bit of information about your background? What brought you to historically informed performance? I know you're a celebrated modern player as well. So just what was your pathway into this world?
Oh, now, that's a lot of questions. So I suppose I just love the clarinet, and all you clarinet players out there also know that, I mean, actually we shouldn't let on this to too many people, but the clarinet's not too difficult, is it? Really, not in comparison to the oboe and the horn and all of that. I mean, of course, we want to finesse it for the rest of our lives. But so I think that kind of ease that we all have with our instruments means we can explore more. And that's really why I wanted to explore every type of clarinet there was, because you kind of can, and there's time and there's energy and there's room to do that. I don't think it takes away from being a great modern player. I think there is enough room in our lives to explore it all. And so that's really what I did. Actually, I suppose to take you right back to the beginning, in Britain, there's an organisation called the National Youth Orchestra, which I was in on my modern clarinet, which you can go in from, I don't know what age, sort of 12 to 18, something like that. And the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment came along to one of the courses to show us. They played the Spohr Nonette, and I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, that's just so good. And I was completely taken aback by their freedom. It was that I wanted to be part of, that freedom. And so then I went off and studied in Germany for a while. And then I came back to the Royal Academy, and it was at the Royal Academy where I was given the opportunity to study alongside the clarinet, early clarinet. And actually, I'm going to be a bit truthful here. It was like you could do that or do the E flat and bass. I just thought, you know what? I reckon this classical clarinet sounds like the better option. I'm nothing against the E flat and the bass out there, but well, actually, also I just thought maybe I knew less about that, and I thought at this stage in my life that was what I really wanted to find out about. So I took up the classical clarinet instead of E flat and bass at that stage, and for a while I did both instruments, studying it, and then after 2 years I just thought, do you know what, I'm going to only do early clarinet as my sort of thing that you finish off in. And again, I'm going to be truthful and tell you why. And it's because there wasn't a set course. No one had done historical clarinet at the Royal Academy of Music before. And I just like to gain that freedom. I love the fact that there was nobody who said which scales I was going to have to do. I was like, well, do you know what? I'd quite like to do these scales because I think they're going to be the most useful. There was nobody who'd set the pieces, the orchestral excerpts, and I just loved shaping something and being part of something that could go in any direction because it wasn't yet set in stone. So yeah, that does that begin to answer it? And then I mean,
Yeah.
of course, I didn't stop playing the modern clarinet at all, and I'd go to my lessons each week, and I'd say to my teacher, Keith Buddy, I'd say, okay, this week I've got Stockhausen's in Freundschaft to do because we're going to do it on its period instrument, which is the modern one, and we do that. And so it just meant I could do everything. I did everything, and in fact, in my final recital, I played every instrument under the sun, and I played music by Maurizio Cargel and Stockhausen to Graupner and some folk stuff, and anything goes. That is what period clarinet is the fact that you can do anything.
That's amazing, Waffy. I'm just blown away by that trajectory, and I love your encapsulation of it in terms of like your ability to just do, to create, to have the liberty, the freedom to do that. And speaking about that, I got the impression that for you, modern clarinet meant a certain track, a certain sort of discipline, a certain sort of pathway, whereas historical clarinet was open and uncharted. And could you talk a little bit about how the two worlds might be different community-wise, and how that impacted further on just your love of the instrument?
So sorry, I got slightly distracted by my son walking through there. So your question is, how do I see the difference between the modern scene and the classical scene, and how there's more freedom, I feel, perhaps in the classical scene? That's the question. Okay. I think that might be to do with the orchestral world, possibly. And perhaps that's going away a little bit too now. I think perhaps maybe 20 years ago, the clarinet players that went to their conservatoires across the world, they felt, okay, I'm going here. And actually, I remember when I first went to study in Germany with Hans Steinzer, and I remember going into the conservatoire there in Hanover and saying to somebody, oh, hi, I'm Waffy and I play the clarinet. How's about we play through the Mozart clarinet quintet with piano? I'm not clarinet quintet, the piano and wind quintet thing. And they said to me, well, why? And I said, what do you mean, why? Because it's nice. And we're all here and we just can. So that's the why. And there was definitely back then, I think, this feeling of, but why would you, has that been set? And are you meant to be studying this? And is this the part of the program? And have you practiced your scales enough this week? And what about those orchestral excerpts that are coming along? And there is an exam. So why would you meet up and play this random piece just because it's beautiful and because we're all there? But I do feel that is of the past. But I think there's still a little bit of that in some of the conservatoires, maybe. But these days, I think we all know as musicians that our job as musicians is much more diverse. We have to connect to the community. We have to help with mental health. We have to work in hospitals, we have to work in schools, our job to serve the world with music is very, very diverse. And I think along with that comes this idea that, yes, maybe our job also is to explore our past as well in a quite open kind of way. And but I think all musicians are going in that direction, don't you think? I think so. I think so. I don't think it's just the sort of early music community anymore that are sort of free-spirited. I think everyone's going that way. We all just want to serve with our music.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And your exuberant excitement about exploring is so inspiring. What do you think are some things that, even still, now that we're going in that direction, what are some things that you believe that maybe the modern clarinet community could learn and take from the historically informed clarinet community?
Well, I think that it's really, I feel it's really important for us to really understand where our music came from. And when I do lessons with students, we very often study Baroque music first before we do anything else, because if you don't know where your classical music has come from, it's impossible to even begin. And then if you don't know where your romantic music came from, your classical music, how do you do that? And then if you don't know, and it all builds on from each other. And so I feel it's really important for us to know where we came from. So we start off with really looking at Corelli and Rameau and all these wonderful composers, and really feeling confident about playing these composers and understanding their language and their rules and their wonderful sounds. Because as clarinet players, we sort of go, oh, we don't do that, and then we're missing the main piece of the puzzle. We've got nothing to build on. And when you play Brahms, if you don't understand classical phrasing and you don't understand the rules of classical phrasing and how to break the rules, which is what Brahms basically did, I think, with his music, then you're just playing nice sounds. And I think that understanding our past and understanding it sort of intellectually gives us so much power to excite our audiences, because when you give them order and then you break the rules and you break the order, that's exciting for an audience. But if they're just at sea and it's just, oh yeah, well, this is great, we love Brahms, oh there's lots of emotion and oh that's a nice sound, well then that's not going to break hearts, is it? I don't think. It has to come from, I sound terrible now, rules, breaking rules. I sound like I'm the most boring person on the planet, but I really feel it's important. If we don't understand the rules of playing, we can't break them.
That's incredible. I love it. Further to that point of understanding the rules, did you see then, in terms of entering the historically informed practice, did you see the idea of rules, or because on one hand you went in with the love of and the knowledge of having a bit more freedom, but then also there's clearly a respect for the tradition and rules that made those sorts of styles necessary and possible, and then which then led to other styles being able to be formed because they have this understanding. Did you see those rules in any way as prohibitive to your self-expression? And were there any sort of like setbacks you encountered when creating this path for yourself?
No, I mean, I had no idea when I went about this that there were going to be rules. I had no idea. This was completely alien to me. You just play music how you feel it, and actually most of the time we instinctively understand those rules, because it's being passed on and it's how we understand Western music. But no, the rules, they don't stop you. They don't ever hinder you. They just give you more tools to excite your audience. It's funny because sometimes my students, they sometimes feel a little bit sort of in a box, I think, at first, because I say, look, I need you to be able to show me hierarchy of the bar. I need you to be able to show me slurs being a diminuendo. I need you to be able to do all these things that are just there. And that has to become totally instinctive. And I think in that phase, when they're trying to sort of go, that's not kind of how I play. And I don't always want to get off beat 4 and onto a separate chair to sit on a bigger one on beat 1. And they can sometimes feel a bit, I see it, a bit uncomfortable. But they have to go through that slightly uncomfortable phase for it to be totally instinctive. And then they have that language, which they can then play with. And then that's the fun stage. But I know, I see it. I see it with my students. I see but they all go with it. So it can't be that uncomfortable. And it was too long ago for me to remember. And actually, interestingly enough, I think I started to feel this sense of order slightly later on, when I started playing in the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. And I sat next to Tony Pay for many years, and he very much believes in this order. And so, you know, there was no getting away. You know, if I didn't understand, he would point it out immediately, and I'm so grateful. So in a way, the rules came to me in a slightly more sort of work environment, I think. So perhaps I was a bit slower to take it on.
So I wanted to ask, well, first, I love I feel like there are less rules and more parameters.
Yes, yeah. I'm using bad language.
So you're expanding parameters, not breaking rules. You don't sound. I love it. So can we talk a little bit, because we're talking about the music coming from us, like understanding the rules, understanding the the performance practice. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the equipment and the connection between, because it's very different from modern clarinet in many ways. It feels more, I've heard that it feels more organically connected to your body. Can you talk a little bit about the equipment and how you connect the emotional, mental part of it into the kit?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on a very basic, I think the most basic level, the important thing for me with the early instruments, one of the important things is the wood. And, you know, many of my instruments are made out of European boxwood. And the thing I like about that wood in particular, although they chose it because it was actually quite a dense wood and quite stable, it's still so much less dense and stable than our sort of, actually that's not a modern instrument, but than our modern counterparts. And so what I love is the fact that I'll get my clarinet out, and it's the first person to speak in my practice, because you know it's raining outside, so it speaks in a certain way, and it tells me its mood before I tell it my mood. And that's what I love. I love the dialogue between me and the wood, and you really get that with all of these instruments. And I have to whisper this because I don't like to let my husband know how many clarinets I've got, but there are in the room here about 36. And what I like about that is that they all have a personality. They all, and some are so moody, even when it's the nicest day ever, they're so moody. And I have to treat them with such love and care. But I sort of know that my modern clarinets, I do love them. I've just bought some new ones, some Yamahas, and I absolutely adore them. And they've got these little bits of pink metal on them, which I find so pretty. And what I love about my modern instruments is they're very posh. And every time I come to them, I think, wow, you're so posh. But they're always posh. Whereas my early clarinets, some days they're posh, some days they're rough, some days they just don't work, some days they're open and free, some days they want to show me their spirit, sometimes they don't. So I think that would be the most fundamental thing about equipment. But of course, I mean, then there's, I mean, the other, I suppose, important, slightly geeky thing to talk about is the fact that because they do move such a lot, you can't really just pick up an instrument and go, right, I'm going to just play that now. You know, if I'm going to play an instrument, I need to sort of let it know it's back in the world again, and that it's going to have to open up and breathe and sort of feel ready to make music again. You know, they need time to just find themselves again. I mean, of course you can just get them out of the box, but they're not going to do their greatest work. So I like the fact that you have to do a bit of practice. I mean, that's good for me. Otherwise I'd never do any practice at all. So you and there's that little getting to know each other phase again, where you know they're finding themselves and you're finding them again. And of course there's the basic thing of that your fingers are touching the wood. They're very sort of tactile. And what have I got over here? You know, this is another one, slightly more standard instrument. I've just bought this one actually. And then I've got lots of originals. And I just love the thought that, you know, I've got one from 1790. And I love, whenever I pick it up, I always think, oh, I wonder who touched this? You know, which clarinet players played this? Maybe Mozart actually heard it, you know, the year before his death, maybe. And I love that. But very often these early instruments, especially the originals, they sing, they really sing. And all you have to do is help them to have their voice and try not to get too much in the way of their voice. Yeah, they're special. And I think probably a lot of them have stayed living in the world because they're special. I don't know why I'm bringing this into it now, but I think it's because I'm thinking of special instruments. So this clarinet that I'm just holding up here, this is a very special instrument, and it's had a wonderful history. It was owned by Hughes in London and then was sold on to Sidney Fell, both great players in the London scene. A long time ago, 100 or so years ago. And then they were sold on to Keith Puddy, who was my teacher, and then he passed them on to me. And they were used, for instance, because this instrument itself was considered so great, such a unique living thing, that that even Reginald Kell, the great clarinetist, borrowed this particular instrument for the famous recording of the the Brahms recording with the Bush Quartet, the Brahms Quintet. And he borrowed this instrument because he felt that this instrument spoke and could speak for him. And I think perhaps we don't feel that with modern clarinet playing. We feel like we do all the speaking. But with this instrument, you have to let it do a lot of the talking. So it's a slightly different connection with the instruments. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so Reginald Kell played on that horn that you just had. And so is that it looks like a modern horn.
It was probably made in 1920. Martel. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, perhaps it looks modern because my house is old. But and I'm old. I can assure you. Hold on. Let me grab a modern clarinet so you can see the difference. 1 second. Don't go away. You can see my nice pink ones. Okay. Here we go. Nice pink, shiny pink ones. Can you see the difference? I don't know, maybe not on the internet, but it's the wood. It's the wood, of course. It's the wood, and there's something about that wood that's totally unique. And people sometimes borrow it and take measurements because they want to understand what is it that makes that clarinet so special. And people write whole papers on it and come up with theories of, is it the density of the grain and blah 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 and all the rest of it. I don't know, I think it's just magic. And it's had some magic people play it, so it
Well,
keeps a bit of magic.
as you know, Waffy, I'm entering this world slowly but surely, and I'm looking forward to our lessons. And one thing I heard before I got in was that with the modern horn, so much of the sound is kind of built into the horn, whereas with the historical clarinet, the period clarinet, we really have to take the time to let the wood adjust to how we play and let it sort of find its voice with us. And so it's really much more of a symbiotic relationship you're developing with the instrument. And have you found that to be the case with your horns?
I don't understand.
No. I might I just like when you play your historical horns, your period horns, do you find that they've taken on the characteristics of your playing style, or that you've had to sort of like adjust to what they wanted to do?
Well, we it's quite an interesting question, that, because I play in various early music groups and orchestras, and of course the idea of the early music ensemble is to recreate the sound world of whoever it is that we're playing. That's our strap line. That's what we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, it's me playing all of these instruments, and and it's you playing all of your instruments, and it's very unlikely that if I play a chalumeau from the 1700s, or if I play that the Kell clarinet, you're still going to know it's me, because it's me playing, and we have our own voice. And you can't get away from that. And I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking, should I try to resist this more? Should I try and take less of me and put more of the instrument in? Would that be more interesting? Because I'm just about to do some Mahler. And I was thinking, and I was listening to various recordings, and I was thinking, how much should I try and sound not like me? And I just haven't decided yet. I don't know. It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a really difficult one.
It feels like just like a human relationship, a collaboration, a give and take. Like how much, like sometimes a friendship, one person is more prominent than the other, and there's just a constant negotiation.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe it's about constantly remembering that and always putting it in check, and making sure there's, possibly for me, enough of the instrument there, I think. So I have to keep bringing myself back, making sure they, if I'm playing a historical performance, people want to hear what that instrument sounds like. They don't want to hear what I sound like. Yeah, but our egos get in the way, don't they, a little bit? I'm sorry to say it. I'm being truthful there.
Yeah. So actually that's a good segue to what I'm next curious about, is if I am not I mean, I'm always inspired by this, but I have not delved into the world, and especially since doing these interviews, I really want to. What are some things that like advice you might give to someone about, like, to prepare them to get into the historically informed community? Like, what do you wish you had known going into it, or what have you learned along the way that you'd pass on to someone?
Well, I mean, the thing that it's done most for me is it's opened up more music for me, because as clarinet players, we get so used to only playing the later material, and so I'm going to say something terrible here. So when I listened to Bach, it didn't really make any sense to me. I mean, I knew it was great music, but it didn't really speak to me. That's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? Luckily, nobody's in the room. But And doing this work has opened up all that music to me, and I just think that's great. But maybe all you clarinet players out there, you're maybe you're less of a philistine than I am. I don't know, it's just fun. It's just fun. And I think I play my modern clarinet much better. And on a sort of practical level, when I start getting myself in sort of knots playing the modern clarinet, because you know how sometimes tensions come in, and I just start to, especially when you're really working towards something, you want something to be really good, and it just doesn't always make it, does it? And you don't keep doing that. And I just find that by doing early clarinet as well, it just takes the focus off that for a while. And when I come back to my modern clarinet playing, it's always better. I always find that freedom again. Any silly little nonsenses that have come in, fingers, embouchure, tongue, tensions, whatever, they go away again. But you don't stop with your journey, but you've just sort of gone on your different path and then come back to it. And I find it really helpful to my modern playing. It keeps it very not tense and keeps it progressing.
So, how should someone kind of get started in the world? Like, where do they start?
Okay, so I mean, the difficulty is getting an instrument. Because I mean, the pandemic hasn't helped at all. These lists for clarinets for a copy are years and years long, and they don't ever seem to go down. to the great makers around the world, of which most of them are. And so I think that the difficulty is getting the instrument, but you don't need to necessarily get a new one. I mean, this one that I've just bought, I decided that after 25 years, I wanted to get a new version of this type of period of instrument. And I just thought, I don't have 3 years to wait. I've got to play it next week. So I bought these instruments from a lovely guy in Sweden. And yeah, I mean, there are instruments floating around there secondhand, and you just have to start sort of asking around. Oh, do you know anyone who's got something? And then, oh yeah, so and so's selling something. It's a little bit like that, I think. And then you can always put your name on to a maker's list, because many of them just say put your name down, and when the instrument's ready, have a try. If you don't like it, you don't need to buy it. So it's not like you're sort of forced to get something that you may have gone off the idea of, or when you try it, you think, oh, that's not really for me. But of course, you can contact players and have a go on their instruments and see what you think. And, I let my students borrow my instruments all the time. And in fact, some of my instruments were given to me so that I could lend them out to people. I've got 7 bass clarinets, which were given to me by the wonderful late Tony Jennings, with the hope that these historical 7 bass clarinets, that I would get the news out there that they are there to be used. I can't use 7 bass clarinets, but they're there to be used. So it's almost like I've got a little library of instruments, and I'm more than happy to let people borrow them, have a go. Maybe not everybody is, but anyway. I think just have a go, make contact with a player. There are loads of us out there, and just put your name down for some instruments, and then keep a lookout for what's wafting around, I'd say. And anyway, I reckon you'll love it. I don't reckon it'll be a bad buy, okay? You can trust me.
That's brilliant, Waffy. Thank you so much. And speaking to like just sort of perhaps the difficulty in getting into the world, you personally, you do so many wonderful and creative things. And I'm just wondering, at the beginning of your career, when you were going into this path that sort of was divergent from the modern world of clarinet playing, did you find any hurdles in developing your performance and pedagogical practice, and anything you needed to overcome personally, or that you're currently like really sort of like, I really want to kind of take on this sort of this hurdle so that it's not so difficult for other people. Do you find that did you have those experiences, and are there any such experiences now that you're able to talk about?
Um, any hurdles? Well, I mean, the biggest hurdle, I suppose, is the instrument, isn't it? That's your biggest hurdle, because you get yourself a B flat. Well, okay, that's okay, but then you need a B, an A, and yes, you do need a C, because if you're going to be historical about it, you're not going to transpose a C clarinet part onto a B flat, because it's kind of not the point of it. So already you need 3 instruments. And when I go out to work every day, I usually take a suitcase with me, and in my suitcase is usually between 7 and 9 clarinets. And that's because I might have a rehearsal for something in the morning, then I'm doing some education in the afternoon, and then I've got a concert in the evening. And quite often they're all different instruments, modern, earlys, blah blah blah, all different pitches: 430, 415, 438, modern. And that is the biggest hurdle, isn't it? Because I don't dare show you over here where all my clarinets are laying, because it's just such a mess. Actually, I'm going to show you. So there's my many trunks of different clarinets. They're all inside, all packed in little tea towels. All 36 of them in tea towels. And I've been getting this collection for the last 25 years. But you need enough to be doing the work, and that's the hard thing. So I'd say the hurdle is getting the instruments and getting enough of the instruments so that you're actually can actually join in the scene. So I mean, I suppose really what we need to be doing is, certainly in Britain, there are quite a lot of organisations that will help pay for instruments for players. I don't know about in America if you've got such a thing, but if there's not, that's really hard, because I mean, I started off with pretty much all of my instruments being bought for me. I borrowed obviously the Academy's instruments to start off with, to know that I liked it, and then I was able to audition for the Countess of Munster scheme that helped me buy something. And that there's all these different schemes in Britain which I was lucky to have. So I don't know what the answer is if you don't have all of that, because that's quite prohibitive, isn't it? And I suppose the thing is perhaps just to get a teacher that's going to help you and just let you have the instruments and use them. Like, I've got loads of instruments out there, all with my various students. I can't even remember who's got what.
Something I've noticed about the historic clarinet community is there is a generosity. There is like a kind of a communal, like less, I don't know, maybe this is the wrong term, but less kind of cutthroat competition and more collaborative, maybe just like you do with the collaboration with your clarinets.
Yeah, I definitely. And we lend instruments to each other all the time, and we ring each other up. Okay, what are you using for this patch coming up? Or do you want to borrow this? And if you use that, I can pair that with this, and then so because you're constantly having to have these discussions of, okay, if you're using that, I'll use this. You have to lend each other stuff, and you have to be collaborative, because you can't just rock up for a patch of work with your instruments and just think, right, I've practiced this and I know that I can play it. Because it might well be that you're the only person playing on a Boehm system instrument, and then you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. So there has to be this conversation all the time of, oh right, what are you using, and blah 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 blah, and oh, I haven't got one of those. Oh yes, well I've got a C for that, so I'll bring that along, and and all of that.
That's amazing to me. I absolutely love that sort of spirit of camaraderie and this sort of like the sharing of information, of knowledge, of instruments, to just make sure that the product itself is the best that it can be and most uniform and most historically informed, right?
Yeah,
And I feel like the more we as clarinetists sort of discover this other way of thinking, the more human and joyful the experience of music making becomes, right? I mean,
definitely.
so thank you so much for sharing that, because that's a perfect way to kind of wrap up this whole idea of community and belonging. I mean, it sounds like the historical community of clarinet players really has a good idea of what community looks like. And it's out of just necessity, right? It's like we need to have a community to support each other so we can do our job. And I just think there's something beautiful about that. Thank you so much. Is there anything you do specifically, like within your private studio of students or amongst your colleagues, that really helps reinforce this idea? I mean, I guess just the sharing of instruments is already enough to reinforce this idea of community. But if there's anything else you want to share about that, feel free, because I think that's just a beautiful idea.
Well, I think, you just have to go by example, don't you? If I'm teaching my students in that way, hopefully they will, when I'm long gone, they'll be doing the same thing. And you just have to be generous, because music has to be generous.
On that note, just to kind of wrap it up, you are involved in so many organizations and different kinds of communities and projects, and that generosity can be seen in a lot of these projects. Would you mind telling us about a few? I know that before this started, I mentioned the ducks. I'd love for everyone to know about that project. But this sense of community and service that you embody, can you tell me a little bit about how you express that in many of your projects?
Yeah, so I do a lot of education and participation work with all of my orchestras. I'm hugely involved in it, and that, for instance, we were discussing earlier about a a video that Sarah saw of me with my clarinet in a dirty canal in London, with some bath ducts being launched that were sort of electronically uh, like with a remote control, and they had music coming out of them. Now you might think, what on earth is going on there? But it was the culmination of a project with Headway East, which is a organisation, in a charitable organisation in Britain, for people living with brain injury, usually from something traumatic. And so we'd been working together for about 6 weeks, and we'd recorded some creative music that we'd done together. And I was the other musician that I was working with, he mainly, his main tool for music is electronic music. And so he had sort of manipulated the sounds and put them inside the duck. And then me playing the clarinet inside the water, he was capturing those sounds. He had a microphone in the canal the other side. And actually, I think some of the people were even singing some of the songs. It was it's quite a weird one, actually, that you saw there. But we were having a great time with our ducks and playing to the rats in the canal. And anyway, nobody died, so that's the main thing. But yeah, I work in psychiatric units for teenagers with eating disorders, and quite often it's on a sort of creative level. And quite often it's long projects, years long. And we're not doing music therapy, but we're doing therapeutic music. And there's a real emphasis on people's voices being heard, and them having a place to really express themselves and really be listened to on a deep level. And I do a lot of work with dementia, and I think probably that would be my favorite work at the moment that I'm doing, because I just love to have a conversation with somebody that maybe doesn't have their words anymore, but they still have so much to tell you. And when you can make sounds, improvised sounds with them, and start to have that exchange, you can talk all day. you know, and it's really, really special and really important. And we have that power, and we need to be using that all the time, just as much as when we go out onto the stage, and just as much as our practice. We have to be doing it every day. And it just reminds us, I think, it reminds me the power that we have to talk to people with our music, because it's very immediate when I'm talking to a dementia resident that I'm talking, that we're communicating, that I'm doing something meaningful and important. And it reminds me that I have to do exactly the same thing when I've got 6,000 people in the Royal Albert Hall, that I need to connect to that level with every single one of those 6,000 people. And they're not just a mass of people, that they're individuals. And remembering that really helps me perform better and in a meaningful way.
That's extraordinarily inspiring. Thank you. Yeah. So with that, any last thoughts on convincing people to join the community and get involved?
Yeah, just do it. Like I said earlier, you won't regret it. I promise you. I really do. You can believe me. You'll love it. Maybe shall I play a little tune before you go?
Yes, please.
Hold on. I did put a reed out. I'm going to play you a little tune on my chalumeau, because I love the chalumeau. And the nice thing about the chalumeau is you can put it in any clarinet case. You can just live in the top, and then you've always got it. And you can sit on any gate you walk past, and you can play to any sheep in any field. One second, just try and get my reed on. Ooh, hold on. Rushing to put a reed on is not good. Okay, here we go. Let me just make sure I got the right sound setting. Little chalumeau. You should always have one in your backpack.
I think I'm
Thank
going to
you
start
so
with that
much.
one.
Thank you so much, Waffy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. You are an inspiration, and your work, I know, is making impactful change in people's lives every day. I myself have been impacted just from watching your videos and interacting with you the few bits of times that I have. So thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and your commitment to serving people through your music. That is so important. And with that, I will say see you all next time on Clarinet and Community. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.